to do it. The son would rather not do it. And still the son does it? Oh, now already it was a harder mitzvah. Anything that's a harder mitzvah to do is obviously has much, much greater value. And the last question is why the promise? So why the promise is really quite fascinating. And that is that Jacob must have understood that the Pharaoh is going to give Joseph a hard time. And I hear the music playing in the back. It's kind of low, but I hear the music, which means that for this show, it's time to put it on hold. So the music is playing. Hope you enjoyed it, short and sweet. Thank you, because wonderful sponsor listeners. You know I can't do it without you. Thank you to the wonderful production team. We have Alan in the back. I hope I've left you some food for thought. Until next time, I'm Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. Until next time, don't forget to think about it.
There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day.
You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and of course I will answer as many as I can. Or you can check out our amazing webpage at letstalktorah.net, no apostrophes, letstalktorah.net. You got the archives, you got the new shows, you got the place for questions and comments, and you want to join the show, we got all kinds of good stuff there. And of course, we have the all-important donate button. And if you'd like to help out the show, we of course appreciate all those who want to donate. And if you want to shout out, just leave us a message in the notes. If you don't want to shout out, you want to keep it anonymous, we're good with that as well. And we are top 10 in FeedSpot's 10 Best Jewish Podcasts, and we are at number 5. And let's keep it going. Tomorrow is a fast day. A Jewish fast day, for those who don't know, a Jewish fast day means no food, no water, except for Yom Kippur when it starts at sunset, goes from sunset to sunset, or on Tisha B'Av. The other fast days start at daybreak. Tomorrow, believe it or not, in Detroit is like 6:49. On the East Coast, it's probably closer to 6:20. Can't tell you exactly. I don't know the exact numbers. Now you have to look it up. But you can actually have breakfast. It's so it starts so late, and it ends once you go pray for the Sabbath tomorrow night, Friday night, and you come home. By the time you get home, you're usually good enough to go eat. Very, very short fast. We'll talk maybe more if we have time later in the show, but tomorrow's fast is when Nebuchadnezzar surrounded the walls of Jerusalem at the end of the first temple. So this fast day represents, as we say, the beginning of the end. Everything now is on a downward spiral. He surrounds the walls. Eventually, he'll destroy the first temple, and even the second temple is only temporary. So this is the beginning of the destruction of the temples when he surrounded the walls. But we'll talk about more stuff that happened, a few other things that happened on this this 3-day window, which we'll talk about. But right now, we have a lot of stuff to talk about in this week's Torah portion. We're in the Torah portion of Vayechi. We're at the end of the book of Genesis. The last show we talked about Jacob's request to be buried in the land of Israel. We spent a lot of time on that, so let's move a little forward. So Joseph gets a message that his father is sick. So he wants his two children to get a blessing for the grandfather. So he's going to bring his two children. Now it's interesting. We always refer to them as Ephraim and Menashe. But really Menashe is older. Menashe is the firstborn. Ephraim is next. Ephraim happens to study Torah with his father. Menashe happens to be in politics with his father Joseph. I'm sorry, Ephraim studies with his grandfather. Ephraim is busy studying Torah, and Menashe is in politics with his father. But Menashe is the older, he is the firstborn. You need to know, and we've talked about this many times, the idea of the firstborn, that he's like in charge of the family. He's by in times of idolatry, he would work for the idol, he would serve the idol, he was like a priest, he was considered closest to God. The idea of firstborn being more important really, really is a non-Jewish thought. And if you look throughout the Torah, the firstborn never wins. I mean, Cain and Abel, right? Cain is older, but the greater brother was Hevel. He gets killed. Noah's sons, the Jewish people come from Shem. He is not the oldest. Isaac and Ishmael, Isaac, even though Ishmael is the older one. Jacob and Esav, Esav is the older one. Jacob wins. Ephraim and Menashe, again, Ephraim, the younger one, is going to get the bigger blessing. The greater person will come out of Ephraim. Reuven and Yosef and Joseph. So Reuven is the Bechar, he's the oldest of Jacob, but the Bechar is taken by Joseph. King David is the seventh son of Yishai. So it's not, right, you see Moses and Aaron. Right? Okay, neither of them was really the Bechar. Miriam is the oldest, but Aaron is older. It doesn't matter. Moses is the one that takes the Jewish people out of Egypt. Moses is the one that gets the Torah. So you see, over and over and over again, the Torah is making a point, and Jacob is going to make this point, even though Joseph seems to want Menashe to get the right hand. There's what to be said. Joseph wants Menashe to get the right hand. And Jacob's going to switch his hands, right? He's going to cross his hands. Menashe and Ephraim are brought up close to Jacob. And Jacob, even though he can't see, he understands that Joseph is going to have Menashe on Jacob's right. And Joseph is going to make sure Ephraim is on Jacob's left. Even before we go further, they get blessed together. When I bless my children Friday night, I don't say I want to save time, and I put my two hands on two different children's heads. Each child gets his own time. So, but here, by Ephraim and Menashe getting their blessing, they're getting their blessing together. And there's a message in that. There's a lot of messages in this week's Torah portion, every Torah portion. Menashe and Ephraim are brothers. Jacob wants to give them the blessings together. You are brothers. You have to be together. You have to work together. You have to act together. You're together. Okay, this is the message that Jacob is imparting on his children. He's going to do the same thing again, by the way, when he blesses all 12 tribes, that your protection in the future, your salvation in the future is going to come because you're together. Giving the blessing together is a lesson, and that may be for the most important lessons we're going to have in this Torah portion. We have to be together. We take care of each other. We're family. You take care of each other. That's what family does. So Jacob is going to cross his hands because Ephraim is the younger one, but he gets Jacob's right hand. Because, okay, so Jacob himself says the greater person, Joshua, who's going to stop the sun is coming out of Ephraim. He needs my right hand. So the greater one needs the greater blessing. Menashe is going to be good. He's going to be great. Kidon will come from him, one of the judges. But he gets my left hand. But, interesting enough, Jacob crosses his hands. Why not just tell him to switch places? If it's so important that Ephraim has to get the right hand, so give him so Ephraim, you move over here, Menashe, you move over here. He doesn't do that. First of all, he doesn't do it because he doesn't want to embarrass Menashe. Having him switch places is going to be very embarrassing. The Maggid says, interesting enough, he said, the verse says Jacob switched his hands because Menashe is the firstborn. He's the firstborn. He deserves to be on the right. He even deserves the right hand. But there's a greater love for Ephraim. It's not to say Menashe is less. It's to say Ephraim is more. So he doesn't have them switch places. Right? Furthermore, we're not throwing Menashe in the garbage, right? We're not tossing out Menashe and saying, you're a nice guy, but your brother's, he's the winner. We're not doing that. And these brothers, by the way, through these blessings, are becoming tribes. So we have the 12 tribes already are born. Joseph now becomes 2, and the Levites become like the honor guard. They're not getting land. In Israel, they're going to have cities, right? But their job really is to work in the temple. So, therefore, when we talk about tribes, is for different things, we have a different 12. For example, on the breastplate of the high priest, of the Kohen Gadol, Joseph's name is there, and Levi's name is there. Ephraim and Menashe are not there. Carrying Jacob's coffin, Ephraim and Menashe carrying. Levi and Joseph are not. Where all the land was divvied up, or the Nasi, the prince of each tribe, that's really not Levi and not Joseph, but Ephraim and Menashe instead. So there are differences. In the Torah, when we count the size of each tribe, Levi is counted totally separate, and Joseph is never counted as a whole. It's always Ephraim and Menashe. Another thought that perhaps Jacob was trying to get across was when people look at their families, who do they look at as being the important ones? What's considered success? Clearly, Joseph felt that my son Menashe, who's in politics, who's going to take care of the Jewish people, he is the most important. While Jacob said, you're giving over the wrong message. Of course, very important. Menashe in politics, Menashe's going to take care of the family. That's massively important. No one is questioning that fact. But the fact is that Ephraim is the one doing the Torah study. If Ephraim is the one who's doing the Torah study, that is so important. His importance supersedes the political son who's taking care of the Jewish people. It's a very interesting, important thought. There's a lot of important things people do there out in the world, and everything is necessary. All different jobs are all important and all necessary. But you need to know the Torah scholars on top. He's the one, of course, everybody belittles because they don't like the fact that they don't have the ability. It's really a select few that have the ability and the wherewithal to sit and study Torah all day long and become Jewish leaders. But Jacob is trying to point that out to Joseph, that politics may be important, but Torah study is more important. Now, by the way, even their names, the names of Menashe and Ephraim, represent what Jacob wants to point out. The name Menashe, Joseph gave his first son name Menashe. He's suffering in Egypt. He's away from his family. The name Menashe means I forgot. Right? God made me forget all my suffering. Whoa. God made me forget all my suffering. In other words, my family is gone. Forget about my family. I'm starting new with my kids. I have no connection to my family anymore. So God made me forget my suffering. Now, I always explain that God made me forget. I'm forgetting where I come from. I don't want to forget where I come from. But at the same time, I have nothing to do with my family. Ephraim is a language of fruitful. God made me fruitful. In other words, connected, right? The fruit's connected to the tree. So Jacob is demonstrating to Joseph, you have one son you named as if you're separating. One son you named that there's a connection. We focus on the connection. We focus on the togetherness. So this is what we keep mentioning over and over. So interesting, when Joseph sees that his father crossed the hands, so Joseph says to his father, "You're making a mistake. Why did you switch hands? What about Menashe?" So Jacob responds, "I know exactly what I'm doing. I know who's who over here. I know the one on my right is Menashe. I know the one on my left is Ephraim. But the one on the left, Ephraim, he has to get my right hand. Even though there are great people that will come from Menashe. I told you Gidon, one of the judges. His children will be they will fill the nation, but not as much as the younger one, that his children, Joshua, the world will talk about Joshua because he stops the sun. That's when he's making that big war with the 31 kings. So I saw an interesting story about talking about fame and what we look for in fame. So it was normal in European communities that every synagogue would have like their book. It's called a Pincus, right? Where if there were famous stories that happened in the town, and you wanted the town to remember it, they would write it down in the book. So in one of these, it's not even such an old story, but in Vienna, right, in Austria, so Rav Dan Segel read a story about a young girl. Her name, her last name was Schiff. That changed once she got married, of course. She had an amazing, just beautiful, amazing singing voice. And her talent was so great that her friends and family, like everybody knew this girl, she is amazing. Now, for a religious girl in the early part of the 20th century, you can't, there's no performing. We don't allow girls to sing in front of men. Orthodox girls do not sing in front of Orthodox men. So she might be amazing, but no one, nowadays they have concerts for women, and women sing and girls sing. In my daughter's high school, they have plays, and the girls get to sing in front of women, so they get to use their talents. But in those days, your talent went unused. The problem was that there was an agent for the Vienna Opera who heard her sing. And he immediately got in touch with this girl and said, your talent is so amazing, you have to be an opera singer. I will get you to sing in the Vienna Opera. You'll be famous, world famous. And that's an honor. I mean, for the Vienna Opera to be able to sing. And she's a young girl. And in those days, when girls didn't have opportunities, she wanted an opportunity. She came back and told her parents, and her parents were not so happy with this. This is not what a Orthodox Jewish girl does. So they didn't know what to do. So her father brings her to the rabbi in the town. His name was Rav Yosef Baumgarten, who tried to convince her and explain to her, and he couldn't convince her. She wants to be an opera singer. So he suggested to the father to bring her to the Kapishner Rebbe, who happened to be in Vienna at the time. So the father and daughter go to the Rebbe, and she wasn't sure, the girl wasn't sure what the reaction was going to be, but she had a totally different reaction than what was expected. He first said, I understand this is a tremendous opportunity. And And I understand how hard it is for you to say no. I understand why you have this dilemma. So he says to her, tell me, why do you want to join the opera? Is it for money? Because you'll become very wealthy. Is it a money question? Or is it for the honor? You'll be famous. So the girl thought for a second, and she actually answered honestly. She said, it's not the money, but the opportunity for fame. I'll be world famous. Everyone will know my name. That's why I want to do it. So Rebbe closed his eyes, and he thought. And he said, it's the dream of every Jewish woman to marry a child who will illuminate the world through his Torah study. I promise you. If you do not join the opera, if you give up the opportunity, you're going to get married, and you will have a son that will illuminate the world with Torah study. And he will become one of the great authorities in Jewish law. So the girl thought, and she said, I accept the offer. So she told the agent she's not interested. She forfeited the chance, and that's life. So if Don Segel said, who is this girl? So her son, who's still alive right now, is Reb Shmuel Wozner. There's all kinds of stories, by the way. The parents on a boat and escaping and swimming and stuff. He's written many books on Torah law. And when Segel went to Reb Shmuel Wozner to verify the story, he said he actually never knew the story from his mother. But one thing he said he knew. He said, when I left home to join the Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, my mother begged me, never stop learning. Never stop learning. And my mother said to me, you can't imagine what I sacrificed for you. But she never told me the story. And now I understand what my mother gave up. And if that's what your mother's willing to give up, then you got to work hard. You got to make sure that her sacrifice was worth it. So Jacob gives the blessings, famous blessing that they got to watch over them, and we say what people say to their children. They go to sleep at night. I see the angel that took care of me. Mikol Ra from all bad. He'll bless the children, and the children should be called to my name. Meaning the children should act like I do. That people will be proud to say that they are the children of Jacob, and they should multiply. And then Jacob says that when parents bless their children, I told you I bless my children Friday night. Many people have such a custom. Some people only have the custom before Yom Kippur to bless their children. But the blessing we give to children is that God should make you like Ephraim and Manasseh, like these two special children. What was so special? Why not to be like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? So it says because, if you grow up in Isaac's home, if you grow up in Abraham's home, if you grow up in Jacob's home, okay, you could be great. But to grow up out of those homes and still be great, we are in exile. So, and most of the Jewish people's history has been in exile. So Jacob is saying the Jewish people are going to be in exile. But these two are the lesson. Ephraim and Manasseh grew up in exile. They grew up in Egypt. They were out of my house. They were never in my house till they're teenagers. Okay, by that time, you are what you're going to be for the most part. Of course, you can always change. It's always possible to change. Which reminds me of an amazing story that I just heard this week, so I guess I'm not going to get too much further. So we bless our children to be like Ephraim and Manasseh. I heard an amazing story. It's my son-in-law's great uncle passed away, and he was a person that sat and studied Torah his whole life. So they said over a fascinating story with him. And this goes back to the 50s. When he was in school, he totally played around in elementary school. Couldn't read, didn't study, wasn't interested, totally played around. So they lived in Williamsburg, and his father would bring him to the Skver Rebbe. And I guess he was in 8th grade, and the Rebbe takes his hand, and he's crying. He says, what's going to be with you? What's going to be with you? What's going to be with your Torah study? What's going to be? What's going to be? And he's crying. So this person said to himself, you know what? I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'm going to go study. So he tells his father, okay, I'm ready to study, but I'm going to high school. So his father takes him to Torah V'das. And the Menal, the principal, tests him, and of course he knows nothing. He can't even read. Like he's not on high school level. And the Menal, the principal, says, I'll accept your son, but he's going to have to start in 5th grade. Can you imagine? A 13 or 14-year-old child is going to hang out with 10-year-olds? And, usually figure it's a joke just to see a shock treatment. So the boy says, let me think. He sits, turns around for 5 minutes. He's thinking, and he says, okay, I'll do it. Sure enough, the first day of what should be 9th grade, big kid walks into 5th grade. They didn't even have a desk for him. They had no desk. Within 2 months, finished 5th grade, ready for 6th grade. They move him up to 6th grade. Within a few months, they move him up to 7th grade. And then by the end of 7th grade, they let him skip to 10th grade where he belonged. But can you imagine a person who was willing to sacrifice, to embarrass himself every day because he wanted to study Torah? And yes, such a person will deserve a life that he sat and studied Torah. Over the last few years, he was writing a lot of, he wrote a bunch of books with his Torah thoughts. Very amazing. Anyways, a lot of Torah stuff today. So Jacob calls in the brothers, the 12 tribes, and he says, gather together and listen. What's this gather together? So there's a beautiful parable I heard. It was a freezing winter, and the porcupines got together, and they realized it's so cold that the only way they'll survive is if they squash together, and their body heat will keep each other warm. The problem was, it's like to cuddle up next to a porcupine. You get poked. So they're poking each other. So they said, oh, it's very uncomfortable. So they started separating. Well, the ones that separated got so cold they died. So they got back together. They said it's worth being poked as long as we're together and our internal heat will keep us alive. So that was the message Jacob was giving the brothers. There's going to be a long exile, and you're going to suffer. So, and when people get close, they poke each other. When we get close to each other, when we hang out with each other, it's we make problems. But Jacob says, you're going to poke each other, you're going to bother each other, life will not always be perfect, but with all the poking, with all the squashing, with all the little problems that come along, don't separate from each other. At the end of the day, which was the message we said at the beginning of the show, at the end of the day, as long as you squash and you hang out together and you don't separate, then life will be beautiful. That is how the Jewish people will survive through the exile. But even though we poke each other, like the porcupines, like a beautiful parable, the Jewish people will only have the ability to survive as long as we stay together. Even though that's life, brothers, siblings, children, adults, we poke each other. And I hear the music is playing in the back. I hope you enjoyed it short and sweet today. Thank you, of course, to all of my wonderful sponsor listeners. Thank you on the production team. We have Alan helping us today. I hope you have listened to Food for Thought. Until next time, I'm Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. And until next time, don't forget to think about it.
There's a house we can build, every room inside is filled